Hello. All right. We good to go? That door okay, I guess? Oh, yeah, okay. All right, that's fine. All right, get going. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Finance Audit Tender and Administration Committee, open meeting, Wednesday, April 15th, 2023. Little bit late getting going here, but in calling the meeting to order, I'd like to welcome you all here, and we'd just like to, Councillor Drong just wanted to confirm at our meeting there at council where we passed the operating budget, and being a member of the finance committee, just wanted to, your record kind of shows usually weren't able to make the meeting, or a lot of times you've called into meetings, but just, being a committee member of the Finance Committee, just wanted to make sure that you were still good with our city's operating budget.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Number 2, declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No. Okay, approval of agenda?
I have a question there, Councillor McAleer.
Yep.
On the approval of the agenda, when we go down to 11D, I had asked to investigate these complaints or concerns, and it says a vote to record the issues raised by the last DCAO. I don't believe I put in a vote to record. I wanted it investigated.
So are you saying it should have been to investigate the issues
Yes,
raised by the last DCAO?
exactly. Like, if it says here a vote to record, what does that mean? Like, I never meant for it just to be recorded. I meant it to be investigated.
Okay. Just CAO Elner, do you have any clarity on that? Is that, or any?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report, if you reword it to investigate instead of to record the issues, the report still addresses an investigation into the issue in response to that. So even with that wording change, we should be able to address what was requested today. Thank you.
That would be great, thank you.
Good, Councillor Drong?
Yeah, and the other, I didn't have access to the closed session, just when I got it here. Is that supposed to be online, or do we normally not post the closed sessions agenda?
Defer that to the CAO, Elner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to Councillor Duron. Generally, the agenda will note online that there is a closed session, but the actual report will not be because it's discussed in closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, with our order of business.
Just excuse me. Just go back. Was that 11D you said, Councillor? Or is it 9D? I have 9.
What?
I have a different one.
This would be the updated agenda. I think this went out yesterday, like the CAO said, and then a newer one went out right after that. So I'm going by the newer one. And the one we have in our package, that's the older one.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify 11D, or 9D with me, 11D, by the last DCAO, I don't think we're talking about the last DCAO. It was our first DCAO, correct? The last DCAO was Tina Lococo. So is that where we're coming from, or is it?
Yes, yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
We all good? Again, order of business, item 4, minutes of previous meetings to follow at the May meeting, and the reason for that is just things just unable to get caught up with all that was going on with getting prepared for budgets and what have you, and changes with staff. But those minutes will follow it for the May meeting, if we're good with that.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, I know we don't have the minutes, but I know we did have a lot of discussion on the grants, correct? And I do have, and I want to pass these out, I do have copies of the grants policy and the bylaw. The bylaw is on our website, under bylaws, under G for grants, and that's the most updated version. That goes back to December 4th, 2018, when it was passed. Whereas the grants policy goes back to, I believe, 2012. So I just want to pass these out to the fellow councillors, so they have a copy of it. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
When I glanced at the grant, and then maybe I need to read the bylaw a little bit more, I still think there's some work for some fixing around criteria when we're giving out money, though.
Thank you. Do you want copies of that? I'll get you copies. Do you want copies? Yeah. And, Mr. Chair, I know that it will be coming up under our agenda, under section, I got number 7, maybe it's a new, yeah, it's still number 7. So, item number 7, we'll have that discussion on the grants.
Do you want to speak to it then?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So we're good on 4. Order of business 5, tenders, as it says, there are none. Which takes us to 6, monthly financial statements, February 2023. That's just been recently circulated. We have Betty French, our esteemed finance manager, with us today at the committee meeting. I know it's just been circulated. Give you a couple of minutes, not to limit it to that, but to peruse it. And if there's any questions to Betty, or if Betty has anything that she'd like to share. I know it's early, but I'll just take a scan here. Not to kind of put you on the spot, Betty, but is there any kind, I know it's early, but any kind of a general comment that you'd have for us or the committee?
Well, these are the February financial statements, and this will be part of the regular reporting to the Finance Committee monthly. It may take us a couple months in the new year to get caught up, but I like to present these monthly so you know where we're at. There are a couple pieces in here that have been missing before. So, for instance, the municipal capital expenditure grants for both city and the water and sewer are in there now, an estimate for the 22-23 year. And we're getting more up to date in the filing for those. We are working on the current year now, and we hope to be within 3 months of getting those filed on a regular basis now, which is good to be doing. Any particular questions?
Yeah, it's kind of getting, I understand, I believe it's probably getting us back on track, or the sort of reporting that's been kind of maybe missing for a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Thank you on that. Any questions to Betty on Okay, Councillor Drown?
Thank you. Thank you, Betty, and, we get through the budget season, that's great, and I appreciate all the hard work. I'm just wondering, are we on the timeline for audited financial statements? Will we be able to meet any deadlines that the MGA puts forward? I know you're new in your job. How is it looking there now? Are we looking okay, or are we behind, or things are you just getting going here? I'm just looking for an update on that, because I know I'll be asked about that. Thanks.
We certainly anticipate meeting all deadlines this year. We have lots of work to do ahead of us, but we have no reason at the moment to think that we won't meet those deadlines. We're very close to getting to the position where we have a full complement of staff in the finance department, which we haven't had for a little while. So yes, having every chair filled certainly helps with that. We have the auditors coming in the week of the 17th of April to do their interim audit, their systems testing. I'm looking forward to meeting the team, and I have a few questions for them to help me get more familiar with this. But yes, I anticipate that we will be on track this year.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
ahead.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Betty. This is great to see that when I was on council from 2000 to 2006, these were monthly requirements. Gives us a snapshot. But again, it's a moving target because we have to wait until the end of the fiscal year. So if I can go to page 2, Betty, when it goes to city surplus deficit, total YTD year to date, minus 3,163,929. So again, that has to be balanced out with the revenue coming in, correct? Like, has all the revenue come in from taxation? So if you go to the second page, flip your page, and it goes at the top, prior year operating surplus, go down to city surplus just before water and sewer annual operations, and just go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. That's always the one that I think is confusing for people.
I can see your concern there because that is showing a deficit of $3 million. But if we look at the column immediately to the left of that, the encumbrance column, there's $4.5 million in that column. And that is things that we have purchase orders out there for, but the invoice has not come through or been processed for that. So if we flip back to page 1, and you go about in the middle of the page, in that encumbrances column, there's an amount of $2,279,000 that sits beside the Fiona expenses line. So there are POs out there for Fiona-related work that we don't have the invoices for yet, and we anticipate getting reimbursed by the province for all of that. So I'm glad you brought that up because you can see there's a new line in there, Emergency Preparedness Fiona funding, and in the year-to-date column, there is funding in there of $3.7 million. So that is the amount of Fiona-related claims that we have submitted to the province to date against a total year-to-date of actual plus the encumbrances for the Fiona expenses of $8.7 million. So we still have lots more Fiona-related claims to put in. So I would anticipate that the claims that we put in would significantly reduce that $3 million deficit you're seeing right now.
Yeah, so that falls under the federal disaster administration program, right? That's where the money comes from, 90%, and the other 10% from the province.
Yes.
And Sue Fraser, who was around when we were here for Hurricane Juan in 2003, your applications going to the federal disaster administration program, it's not a very fast process. So we have to make sure that we calculate that into, the accounting of this hurricane or disaster that we went through. So I know that that's how it's going to look for the next few months, but it will balance out from funding from the other levels of government, provincial, especially federal, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And before we close off our fiscal year-end March statements, we will be making estimates of what we're anticipating receiving, and that will be booked into the March accounts.
Oh, you can make those estimates and book them in?
Any further questions to Betty on the February 23 update? All right, thank you for that, Betty. Moving on to order of business, item 7, policy, finance policy update, and it's grants and procurement, and going to combine them together and have Eleanor, our CAO, speak to those, please, if you would, Eleanor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of grants, we're actively working on a new bylaw, possibly policies as well, under the direction of council to get that done within 2 months. So we're on it right now. And in terms of procurement, we're actually going to address that in a little bit with the BDO report recommendations and implementation matrix. So there'll be more detail there. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarification, Chair?
Yep.
So we do have this bylaw and we do have a policy, but what I'm hearing is it is going to be updated to make it a little bit clearer and a little bit more consistent?
Thank you through the chair. That's correct.
So, Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that?
Go ahead.
So if we look at the policy, again, it goes back to May 11th, 2009, and we all know that the bylaw overrides the policy. And the bylaw was passed on December 4th, 2018. If you look through it quickly, you'll see that it's pretty much up to what we've been doing over the last 4 years. So I'll be surprised if there's a lot of revisions, but I know looking at some of these requests for funding, for example, the Vessel Art Studios, the National Youth Orchestra Charlottetown Visit, these are grants that have been, hinging on a timeline, and that timeline has passed. So if they don't get the funding, hence they may have to not look at going ahead with these events. And also, if we look at what was requested by the Confederation Center and the Charlottetown Library Learning Center, again, they are hinging on their own fiscal year-end fiscal, or their year-end audit and closing up the books. Plus, we also gave a commitment to Tremploy that, it was a great idea. And again, if I look at the policy or I look at the bylaw, everything fits there. There's no round peg trying to go into a square hole. So I just think that, we have to move on some of these so that we can give some certainty to these organizations that made requests to us.
Yeah, I don't know, is there any other thought on the committee member, Councillor Drong, McCabe, on?
Yeah, I'm just looking, and Your Worship, I agree, it's important to get this, but even in our bylaw, it says that we were going to have, under the bylaw, a grant program established for organizations and groups. So there is still work to be done if we're going to do it right, to make sure that we understand what the criteria is. It protects the corporation, it also protects the organizations, and I'm sure that we can get this done soon.
Yeah, well, the current bylaws has done that for the last 4.5+ years. So I think that we've been using due diligence past finance committees and members of that standing committee for finance administration tendering. So again, some of these organizations just may not continue or not operate this year because their funding from one organization is hinging on other funding that would be coming from other sources, which could be federal, provincial, foundations, and so forth. So I want to move some of these. And if I can't move them tonight, I'll have to try to find another way to do it because, again, it was 11th hour decision to do the review, and now we're looking maybe at 2 months. But again, the review to me will be just maybe adding a few more ands and commas and periods. So I really like to move this forward on some of the files I mentioned.
We have a grant program under our bylaw? Do we have a grant program already established?
Yeah, it's right here.
No, that's a bylaw. The grant program that was going to come under the bylaw. Individuals with that, then that's what it would be. It would be understanding the criteria and stuff established, committing to treating grants in consistent, fair, equitable manners, a grant program for organizations and groups considered to be in the best interest of the city, so that we would have a grant program established underneath our bylaw. But this bylaw is great, but there's still things I think that have to be incorporated underneath the bylaw in order to establish criteria and stuff. And again, my point isn't that I don't want to give out the money. My point is that we just had a BDO report that said we have to do better when it comes to our processes and procedures. So we want to make sure it's perfect timing to do things properly.
Yeah, and I see what this bylaw represents, but you're asking for a grant program, or what are you asking for?
I'm not asking for it. It's indicated in the bylaw.
Grant programs.
The city will establish under the bylaw a grant program.
A grant program,
Program, which to me, when I read that,
in-kind grant program, grants for taxes. You're asking for all backup documents on all those areas?
I'm asking for the criteria that I believe we would look at when we're looking at giving out money for grants.
Well, yeah, well, there's 6 areas right there, so you'll want a separate criteria for each one, like financial grant program, in-kind grant program, grants for tax?
Well, what I'd like to suggest, my personal feeling is that we set out, as we said in the budget, that we'd go with this window. I'm not sure, I'll ask CAO Elner if we can meet this timeline to address this pressing issue in terms of getting money to some of these requests.
Can't be that pressing.
Thank you, Chair. We can meet the timeline of under 2 months that was requested. 2 things. The first being it was council's instruction to administration to update the bylaw if needed or the policy. And if I recall correctly, and I don't have minutes before me, the issue was a need for criteria to help make decisions on some of these higher priced items looking for grants. So that's the real challenge here. So our existing bylaw and policies are absent of that criteria. So that's why we were instructed to do this. Now, if the committee today decided that they wanted to look at some of those who needed attention, that would mean going back to council and having council give that extra instruction to administration to do that. But like I said before, we are confident we will get it in within the 2 months that was asked of us.
Yeah, my personal feeling is finance chair, I'd like to stay in the track that we're on.
Yeah, but this committee made a recommendation to council to review it. Council didn't make a recommendation, this committee did, this standing committee. And council agreed during the budgetary process to go with that. So any future, any new grants that come out of this discussion, whether it's now or 2 months, they have to go back to council to be approved.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Through the chair. So what was referenced at the time of budget were those grants that were received in time for budget. And this consideration was specifically for new grants, not existing grants. The existing grants would get filled like they always would be, and these would be for the new ones. There is nothing to stop this committee from making recommendations to look at certain grants or to revisit the instruction that council gave. It's just we need that instruction from council to change course of what we're doing.
And when I read the bylaw and it says that council's committed to treating requests in a consistent, fair, and equitable manner, to me, that goes back to the criteria you're talking about. So I would struggle until that's in place to know that we're following the bylaw that's already in place.
Again, I repeat, I guess, what I've already said. I think my advice is comfortable to stay on the path that we're on with the review and the update of the grant bylaw policy process / I guess.
So there's no appetite to look at Tremploi or to look at these new initiatives through economic, tourism, and cultural development. That's what we're saying. Correct, Mr. Chair?
Well, I don't see 2 months being any kind of a. I think Tremploi be happy if that ends up being a decision. I can't imagine anybody that's looking for money is going to be in 2 months' time that they're not certainly going to be happy if they get the answer that they're for their request, and then if not, that's a different story, I guess, of course. But anyway, I think that we're on the track of reviewing and putting another lens on what we're doing, and I think with new CAO in place, it's an opportune time to stay the course on what we've decided to do with it. So,
Is there is there any that is like catastrophic timeline here? Because nothing was presented like we had to have an answer within a specific time frame. So if I'm missing something, I'm not saying I'm trying to be difficult. I'm just saying that I'd like to be consistent and fair and have criteria that we're able to justify it to. Was there any?
no.
There's no one that said I need this by, or it's contingent on other funding, or unless you just have some, maybe he knows.
So, are we good with that?
No, but we'll go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. Going to order of business number 8, BDO recommendations, implementation work plan, the matrix. I know that this has been circulated to committee members. I'm hoping that you've. I know time is precious, but I hope you've had time to view it. Basically, an action plan to respond and for the BDO report, recommendations and timelines. I don't know how the committee, how you'd like to kind of handle this. You've reviewed them. If there are questions, comments, that you have, is it something we need to go through? Like I said, trusting you've had the time to read it. If you haven't, and you feel, do we go through it by line by line? Is there people, are the committee comfortable with what they have in front of them in terms of this matrix and in the action items?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to state one thing. We received this report from BDO. It's called Investigation of Whistleblower Complaint. Now, whistleblower legislation, my understanding, and I'm just going to Webster's Dictionary, is anyone that makes a complaint about their organization. But I don't have any Canadian law here, but it states through the U.S. Congress, I think whistleblowers play a hugely important role in countering the worst corporate and government excesses. The U.S. Congress also added significant new protection for whistleblowers. The 1986 Act provides remedies, including reinstatement, back pay with interest, and as appropriate punitive damages for whistleblowers who are discharged, demoted, or discriminated against due to involvement with a false claims disclosure. So I just think that this, if we're rewriting this report with BDO because we're looking at redacting some of the names because they've given their okay through the FOI process, that we don't refer to it as an investigation of whistleblower. It's investigation of allegations against the city of Charlottetown, because whistleblower is an inappropriate term for this report. And I don't know why BDO didn't pick it up, but I want to just state publicly, whistleblower, most cases, you're still in your job and you are released because you have blown the lid on something that has happened illegally in the organization. With our first DCAO, I believe his probation was not extended after his second one, so he was outside of the organization and made these allegations. So I'd just like to get that clear on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't speak to the correctness or otherwise of your, the statement, and we have some legal counsel in the room. I don't know if it's any kind of comment on that, Karen, or CAO Eleanor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Later on in the agenda, we do discuss another iteration of this report. If this report goes out in another iteration, we can definitely speak with BDO about changing the title.
All right, thank you. So again, in general, with the committee members, is there, is there comfort, clarity with this matrix and what it represents and its intent? And go ahead, Councillor Drum.
Thank you, Councillor McAleer. I'd like to go through it. I've looked at it. I haven't gone through it word for word. That kind of caught me off guard, the mayor's statement there, but a whistleblower in U.S. Congress and stuff. I mean, we have whistleblower legislation in Canada. I don't know why you're going to U.S. for you couldn't find it? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what you're referring to, though, for the whistleblower. And I mean, he put this in. He put all his complaints in when he was let go, fired, or wasn't renewed. Back whenever it happened. It was, I think, a week or two after, or I'm not sure of the exact deadline. So what is your whole idea of changing the wording of the report?
No, if I can.
No,
If you look at the first page in the report that we received, it says investigation of whistleblower complaint. I'm saying we don't have to put whistleblower because this is not a whistleblower issue. This was an employee that was his probation was not extended, and so he forwarded allegations. So he is accused in the city of Charlottetown of doing wrong in our financial procurement and other comments or arguments that he made in his allegations. That's why I am saying whistleblower it's a misnomer. It should not be there. I want this third report, if we come out with a third report, is that it would be the investigation of complaints against the city of Charlottetown, not whistleblower complaint. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
That's
okay.
it. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't understand. When
glad you
this
clarified.
came out, there's 18 allegations that were proven to be true. So if you're just looking to change the title, maybe, with council's approval, and we get a third report out, then we could look at changing, I guess, whatever title, I guess, if that's something that you feel that should go. So you have to put that up to council, or what? What are you asking for?
I'm just saying that if our CAO and our manager of finance ask BDO, or if a third report, unredacted report comes out, that it doesn't have the title investigation of whistleblower complaint. It has investigation of allegations, complaints from a former employee of the city of Charlottetown. That's all I'm saying. It's just, again, whistleblower, when you use whistleblower legislation, that's to protect the person when he or she's working. And if that person is let go, then there's, as I pointed out in the US law, which would be similar to Canadian law, and I may be wrong with our own lawyer here, but I'm saying that he or she could go back to the company and said, I've lost 6 months of work, this is the damage it's done to me personally and my family, and then there's compensation awarded.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Drong, you referenced you'd like to go through some. Were you thinking a line by line, or are there certain recommendations, certain points that you have would like to go into discussion on, or?
Yeah, like just to go through it, like to have these recommendations, the actions that we're going to do, the timeline.
Okay.
You know, I mean that's good. You know, and else we just put them online if you don't want to go through them. Maybe it's
Yeah, no.
whatever you think.
Eleanor, would you kind of step us through? We maybe don't got to read it verbatim, but just kind of the high points on it, and if there's there's a question as you're going through it, committee members can speak up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to add the detail that interim CAO Donna Waddell worked very hard on this matrix, and I came in at the very, very end. So thank you to Donna for that. So this matrix was built from the BDO report, where we took each recommendation, came up with whose responsibility it is, along with the actions to be taken and the timeline. And you'll also notice an extra column in the matrix that says status and implementation notes. And that's because the intent is for this matrix to come back to council quarterly. This is a public document and will show with clarity the progress that we're making in implementing the BDO report. So diving in, and I'll keep it high level rather than reading every sentence that's on here because there's quite a few recommendations. The first recommendation is G43. And the recommendation is in respect to meals expense claims. And the responsibility for that falls under our finance manager, HR manager, and myself. And the actions are to update the expense policy for both elected and staff. And of course, we'll take the details from the report in there. We intend to bring it in June 2023. And present it to this committee in June 2023, as well as the HR committee in June 2023. I'll keep scrolling
I
unless
have a
there's
question
questions.
on that.
Okay.
Yeah. This became a hot button issue in the last municipal election because of the Quebec dinner. And anyone that was at the Quebec dinner in 2019, the per diem at the time was $150. But the per diem was not prescribed. It wasn't prescribed for a lunch or your supper. And of course, some members or some resident citizens of Charlottetown said, well, you get free meals there at the FCM. No, if you go to the FCM, it's usually day-old Starbucks coffee and 2-day-old croissants. So it's not always a meal provided at these FCM meetings. And I think this is a great start, that if we're going to be, if we're looking at meals, let's prescribe what the 150 is for. Is it traditionally, and I think Sue remembers this, traditionally it was set aside for taking time off work. And now we have a situation where some of us are retired, but we're still taking time away from what else, other activities that we could be doing. I'd really like to see this more precise, more clear, a clearer vision going forward. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you. And I just realized I skipped to page 2. So let's get back to page 1. So that would be G13. And that's in relation to capital project approvals. And the responsibility for that is the finance manager and myself. And the actions are to develop spreadsheets to track capital projects and report quarterly to finance committee on them. and to prepare a procurement bylaw, which will address change orders and approval of the same. You will see a theme throughout this matrix, and it's procurement. So we'll be looking at procurement bylaw from all sorts of different angles. The timeline for this, for the spreadsheets, is April 30th, and the procurement bylaw, we hope to have it to finance for June 2023.
And could I just ask a question, Mr. Chair, on this one?
Go ahead.
So with Hurricane Fiona, Betty, I know some of our infrastructure was severely damaged because of Hurricane Fiona. And I believe some of those components were not calculated as part of our infrastructure. And going forward with Fiona funding, that may not apply. Is that true or false?
Pardon me, I don't have details on that, but I'll look into that.
Would you? Because if that's the case, then we will be losing 90% funding from the federal disaster administration program and the province. I'd like to just have that looked into. I think it relates to our infrastructure out at the Milton Vale well field, where we tried this idea of using green technology to operate our systems, our pumps. And if you know where Milton Vale is, it's on a top of a hill, and it was direct. It was in the direct pathway of Hurricane Fiona. So, if that's the case, we could have lost. That there's a possibility we've lost a lot of federal funding because it wasn't captured as assets. Thank you.
Continue there.
Thank you, Chair. The next item is G23, and that's the use and sale of electronic devices to staff and officials. The responsibility would be IT manager, finance manager, and HR manager. And the action will be to develop and present policy on the use of personal devices and permitted reimbursements, including disposition of devices. The intent is to present it to the Finance Committee in July of this year. Okay, the next item is G33. And this is in respect to city-owned property. And I'm just seeing if I can summarize this one closely. It has to do with the appropriate documentation of city-owned property and determination of surplus status of city property. So the responsibility for this is with Public Works Manager, Finance Manager, and myself. And the action is to update redistribution and use of city property policy.
Can I just ask a clarification? When all these HR managers and finance, public works, is that all going to go through like Public Works Committee? Is it going to go through HR Committee and then come back to Finance Committee and then get to Council?
Thank you, and through the chair. So the intent is, under the timeline, that's the committee we're coming to for this. If we have to coordinate, the idea is a lot of this will be operational. So we'll coordinate amongst the managers and come with one versus many for a decision, just to streamline things. Thank you. Okay.
And you did 4-3.
Did 4-3.
So Councillor Drunk?
Yeah, just on that, I never attended an FCM meeting, and I just want to reference like I don't know if they're day-old croissants and old coffee, but the steak dinner that was involved. Like, I'm sure this policy that goes into place would look after all those things, right? You're talking about a per diem, and so I'm just trying to, that's the expense policy that you're going to work on. So this won't happen again, right?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to Councillor Drong's point, isn't it the piece, or at least I heard it on the door when I was campaigning, this kind of a which, resonates with residents. Fees or whatever, with your fees, the registration, with the understanding meals are included, and then you're expensing meals on top of that, and just the perception, I guess, and I guess if that can be perhaps more clear in terms of what, that there's no double dipping going on on that sort of a thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's great that you get a per diem. Like, do you have to supply receipts, or do you just get the per diem and you get your meal? So, that came to me a lot, and the BDO report, strengthens that to the expense policy has to be stronger for everybody. So, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for your clarification, CAO. Appreciate it.
Councillor McCabe?
Thank you. And I think it's two different streams. You have your PDMs that you give to your staff who attend conference that are being paid by the city, who, if meals are provided, they probably don't justify for a meal allowance. My understanding is the per diem that's been given to council is not designed, as his worship said, for anything specific. So if you attend a meeting on a Saturday and it's a separate meeting and you go out, there's per diem granted for time again. It's extra time even though you're an elected official and you're doing these things. But it is time, whether you're an employee and you're losing time at work. This is not a full-time job as an elected official. This is, for me, if I haven't attended FCM, but if I did, it would be 3 days with no pay for my employer in order to be able to attend professional development. So I think it is the clarity around what the per diem is really for, but it's not meal expenses from my understanding, and that's how I've explained it to people when they've asked me the questions.
And, Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that, I've been at more than several plus FCMs, and there is one meal at the end. There's the gala dinner, but you have to pay for that gala dinner. It's $150 for the gala dinner. It's probably more now. But everything else at the noon hour, you're on your own because they just let you out in the morning. As they said, it's two-day-old Starbucks coffee and some rusty, crusty croissants. But on the Quebec dinner, right, that was a tradition. That was a mayor's tradition that was carried on, that was started well before Philip Brown landed in Old Quebec in May of 2019. That was something that was a get-together for councillors. And you know what? Calgary, the city of Calgary, they have a hoedown at down Grand Allée that was unbelievable, and they invited people from everywhere. So I know the Canadian Tax Federation zeroed in on Charlottetown because of steaks and some beverages that were consumed and what we ate at a steak club in Quebec. But our per diem, it wasn't prescribed in the per diem. It was just $150 off for the day. And it was to cover expenses like if you had a dog that you had to keep at a kennel. Now, I think what the CAO is saying, we're going to look at prescribing what that 150 is. Is that correct?
Great, that's
CAO?
right.
Thank you, through the chair. So there's several approaches that can be taken in this, whether you're giving a per diem for meals, for travel, for all sorts of things. So those are all the details that we'll look into. Two different streams for council versus staff. And you'll see later on in this matrix, the other thing that we need to clarify as well, especially with meals, is the difference between attending a conference and a meal versus a business development meal for the corporation. So those will all be clarified, so it's crystal clear for everyone.
Yeah. All right, continuing on.
I'd just like to ask one question, just
sure.
for clarification. I mean, this has been going on for us for 4 or 5 years. But what you're saying is the steak dinner is the mayor's, end of the week thing? Is that a meal or social activity? What?
Okay, so the FCM, at the final days or the final day, councils are all over the jurisdiction, whether it's Calgary or Quebec, and in the past, I know I attended a mayor's reception when I was a councillor in Hamilton, and I also attended one that was in St. John's, Newfoundland. And that is a sit-down with councillors, friends, staff, and it's paid by the mayor's office. And we weren't the only jurisdiction doing that. Many, as I said, in the Calgary hoedown was in the final days. It was an open invitation. We were just ourselves as a group, staff, councillors, and if spouses were there too. And Councillor Drawn, it's not going to happen again because we know that going forward, I can tell you, again, this is another, going back to 2001, we had Christmas parties, standing committees had Christmas parties with staff and council members. We'd go down to the Delta, or we'd go down to the Rods Hotel, and we'd have dinners with food, beverages, and a great night. And it was charged to the city. I think by 2007, it stopped. So something triggered that stopping of that kind of an event. But it was a great event to celebrate with our staff and with other council members who sat on the standing committee. So you know what? Going forward, Quebec, the last dinner was in Quebec, 2019.
Okay, I'd like to, we got to get through these recommendations, and there's more agenda items. So if, I think got loud and clear, we got to fix it. Nothing but the good policy, and I think that's in the capable hands of CAO Elner, and look forward to having that updated. And Betty, I don't think it's rocket science to fix it, and we just got to get the right language and the right policy. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. G53, which is in respect of pension plan exceptions. So in this case, the responsibility is the HR manager, and this is simply monitoring all new hires to ensure compliance and involvement with the pension. The next item is G63, and this is in respect to procurement.
Yeah, I think we kind of all good with that. That's got to get tightened up. I don't know if we got to talk on that much more, do we, or unless
Keep going.
like it's got to get fixed.
Okay. The next is G73, the city's position on non-payment of liabilities or obligations, such as incorrectly collected HST amounts. So this is the responsibility of the finance manager and CAO, and to be presented to Finance Committee and Council. And this will also involve educating managers on compliance rules and monitoring, of course, minutes of committee meetings to ensure compliance. So this is targeted for September 2023. The next recommendation is G83, agreements for the use of city property or right-of-ways. The responsibility is the Public Works Manager and the CAO. The actions are to work with records management to set up a database on all city-owned property, keeping all agreements up to date and renewed when required. The timeline for this is September 2023. G93, which is there's a needed written agreement with a private business to document the exchange of value for city resources. This is with the Public Works Manager and the CAO. Action is to prepare the agreement, and that is to be done for July 2023.
CEO Eleanor, could you clarify that? Is that about properties that we own and that we sell to individuals or companies or organizations?
So I won't speak specifically about this business because I don't know. I intentionally just said a private business because this might be one of the ones who has not given permission for their information to be shared. But generally, the idea is that if there's any, say, the city has decided to plow someone's driveway, we would have an agreement in place to that. So it could be any sort of service that we're providing in exchange for something or for something, making sure that we have criteria and agreements in place for doing such things. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, G11.3, and this has to do with security for development permit deposits. This is with the planning manager and finance manager. And this is to develop a written administrative policy to address security deposits and how we handle them, just so we're consistent. And this is to come to September 2023, Finance Committee for information only. G12.3, this ties into our previous conversation.
Yeah.
That talks about expense reimbursements and per diem allowances. So as we discuss, we're going to tidy that up and make it nice and clear. We'll come to finance in June and HR committee. Again, because two different streams that are being addressed there. G14.3, which is reviewing the capital expenditure accounting process. This is with the finance manager. Action is to develop departmental policy for the process and present to the finance committee and council quarterly. And that's September 2023.
Yeah, excuse me if I could. And just on that, I know, Betty, that this was something I talked to you about, that this recommendation that capital expenditure accounting process to ensure there's complete and timely record of actual spending against the approved budget, and you felt that was something that would be reasonably facilitated in terms of reporting kind of going forward, and I don't imagine anything's changed in your thinking on that, and that being deliverable?
Certainly, because I think we are doing a good job of tracking that now. The piece that we're not doing is reporting to the Finance Committee, and so that would be an additional step that we can put into place.
Thank you. Continue on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. G15.3, again, stated capital expenditure and procurement policies bylaws should be followed. The responsibility is with the finance manager. So the actions include procurement bylaw and implementing policies and education of staff, June 2023. G16.3, again, this comes back to procurement and process. I suppose the last one should have been finance manager and CAO too, so it will be the finance manager and myself again for this one. Again, it's procurement bylaw and education of staff. The next one, G17.3, did I just say that one? I'm getting lost in my list. This one also, yeah, I did read that one. That's procurement process.
Yeah, could I just go back to that, Mr. Chair? So over the, CEO Eleanor or Mohammed, I know over the last few years, we've had issues with our procurement process, especially during the COVID-19 about buy local, support local. And I remember or recall at a finance meeting that we did bring in the provincial procurement officer, I think Laurie Richard, to go over their procurement policy or procurement process. And there was a focus on, again, buying local, supporting local. I'm just bringing it to your attention now that has to be first and foremost. I know I've seen some of this process where an evaluation's done is completed on the tenders. Like there was one, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Councillor McCabe, where I think someone wrote a better essay than the other bidder. So I didn't know that Clarence Snow was based on writing good essays. So I just think the language has to be, very much focused on supporting our local businesses. Thank you.
All right. Continuing on.
Thank you, Chair. Next one is G18.2, and this is the city should consider conducting periodic reviews of low dollar expenditures. And this is with the finance manager. And this will be developing a process to conduct the periodic review. And that's for August 2023. Oh, did I skip one? My apologies.
I'm at the G17, yeah, with the naming rights. I don't remember.
Oh, I see. That's where
Sorry.
I got confused because procurement is identified there. Again, that threw me into confusion. Okay, so this one is regarding naming rights. It's another area that we do require some clarity. So this will be myself, the finance manager, economic development, and we'll be developing a policy regarding naming rights, and that will come to finance committee in September.
Is that going to incorporate naming rights for all departments, so buildings, parks, streets? I know streets aren't really asked because developers can do their own street naming, but so like our city parks or our city buildings, or will that all encompass that?
I think this is naming for money. Like Eastlink has paid a certain amount. Bella Lion, yes, I think that's what it, I don't think it covers the other naming policy that went through that we covered under strategic priorities and communication. I think they're two streams, correct?
With the same name, which is confusing for, I'm just giving my perspective. We're gonna have it a naming right, name, like two streams. If I could make a recommendation, I think either we put everything under one and clearly define what we're talking about, or we find some different words, because you can't really use the same word for different streams and think it's going to be clear.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. Noted. It could be simple as naming parks. There's ways to delineate that. And to be clear, when it comes to naming rights, it's not just naming the buildings. The trends across Canada are for these recreation centers that there's the building, there's the sponsored room, there's the sponsored field. So this is the criteria you set to be able to do such things. Okay. So
And we're on
the
H?
last
H? Yeah.
one. I'm sorry, my computer has decided to automatically scroll here. Okay, so this comes down to the final recommendations regarding risk of potential fraud arising from matters identified in the complaint. So in the investigation, there were no findings of fraud or any crime committed. So just to be clear, we've got some recommendations here to prevent such things from happening. And the responsibility for this is with the Finance Committee and the Finance Manager, and I'll also add the CAO. And the actions are to request the city auditing firm to undertake a review of a department each year to ensure that internal controls are in place and that the department is working in an efficient, and I would say an effective manner. And that is to occur in 2023.
Thank you, Eleanor, and just comment. The BDO report. It's certainly provided. It's been a process. It certainly has come out with some good recommendations. There are some things that obviously need immediate attention. But the good thing, if your projection on your timelines is right, it's I'm going to say within 6 to 8 months, we should be sitting in a pretty good spot in terms of the action items being delivered on. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd also like to highlight that, it's the role of the CAO and administration to make sure our bylaws and policies are up to date and include risk management and things like this. So this matrix itself is a response to BDO, but there's also other work that will be going on to make sure that we are within best practice in terms of quality control and risk management and taking those into consideration. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for putting the matrix together, yourself and former CAO Donna Bedell and Betty, your team or whatever. It's a good presentation. nice to be able to see it on paper. And any further questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Drown.
I as well applaud you and Donna Waddell and anybody else that worked on this. This is great information for us to see us moving forward. The thing that keeps jumping up at me, you know, some of these recommendations from the BDO report, we have not identified instances of apparent fraud. Now, you know, we were told that that wasn't their mandate, that's not their expertise. They didn't investigate it. If we were looking for something, we would have to do more. Is that a fair comment? Like, you know, I know when we were told that, they weren't looking for fraud. Like he said, it wasn't our expertise to look for that. So when the recommendation comes out, we have not identified instances of apparent fraud upon the city. However, we have observed deficiencies in the application and enforcement. So, you know, I don't think the complaint ever asked them to look for fraud, and that just keeps coming up. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Well, I guess, you know, you weren't here at the time. I don't know what else to say. I mean, when the person gave us the report, you know, he clearly said it wasn't his intention to look for fraud. So I don't know if maybe a clarification could go back to them. Would that be a question? I know our lawyer was in the room at the time as well. It just keeps jumping out that, you know, they talk about fraud. I don't think there was ever fraud alleged, but they didn't find it, but they weren't looking for it. Would that be a safe comment? Anyone?
Go ahead, CAO Elner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to Councillor Duran. My understanding, and again, I've come in as a new CAO, completely neutral here, other than working in the corporation's interest and public interest to make sure that we manage our risk and abide by the laws accordingly. My understanding of BDO did quite a comprehensive review here. Explicitly, no, they weren't looking for fraud. However, they did an extensive review on all of our processes and certain details in relation to these complaints. If fraud was identified in that process, they would have flagged it for us. And I think that's what we're trying to get at when we say there was no crime or there was no fraud. It was an extensive review. And BDO, these are certified accountants. They're obligated under their code of conduct to speak when they see illegal things occurring in different operations.
Thank you. That's, you know, that's a good understanding of it. It just, you know, it kind of muddies the waters when I keep seeing this in the report, but that's a great explanation. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, if again, looking back to what we asked for, we did ask for an audit, remember that? And then it was asked to do a forensic audit. And forensic, again, using the Webster Dictionary, is an argumentative exercise. So I think that BDO used an argumentative exercise. And as you said, CEO Mohammed, that if they discovered that there was some fraud, if there was fraudulent activities, they would have been responsible, or they would have acted as forensic auditors to bring that forth to the attention of council. Again, I go back to 2002, 2003. We did have a forensic audit here at the City of Charlottetown, and they did discover in that forensic audit fraudulent activities, and that report was never released to the public. It was never discussed outside of this chamber. It was given to us in a closed meeting of council, but the forensic audit did show that there was fraudulent behavior, fraudulent activities. That's, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, an argumentative exercise.
Go ahead, CAO Elner.
Thank you, Chair. I have not looked up the definition. However, your rationale does make sense. And like I had said, there's a professional obligation there that should you come across these kind of things, you must report them.
Anyway, I would like to look forward on this,
Can I
on
just
this
make
sort
one-
of thing, and like to think that with the policies and the timelines and the action items that we've identified and have just gone through, and that coupled with our KPMG governance model, that again, once these things get acted upon, hopefully there's a new day going forward in terms of the operation, the city corporation and council as well.
Chair, if I could just wrap that up with what His Worship said, as well as trying to tie it. I think when we did the audit, it was to try to instill confidence back within the residents of our city. And we looked specifically at the 18 allegations and explored those, or I didn't, because I'm not an auditor, but because they do have a profession and ethics to follow, I think what it did was to try to make the statement that there has been no crime committed within the city. We're at a good spot. Here we are. We're starting fresh, and we're ready to move on. So,
And Mr. Chair, I'm going back to this recommendation, but I do want to say that Councillor McCabe is an excellent guidance councillor. She may not be an auditor, but she's an excellent guidance councillor. So if I go to actions on page 5, request the city auditing firm. So we're looking at individual audits, right? Are we looking at notice to reader, review and engage, or are we looking at a full audit? What are you doing? Because is it an audit? This is on page 5. So is that Betty or Eleanor? Is that a financial audit or is it an organizational audit? What kind of audit is it? I would assume that it's a financial audit.
Thank you, Your Worship. From what I can see here, this audit has to do with our different controls in the different departments. That can be finance, that can be how we follow policies and bylaws. That's the kind of audits that this is referring to. Thank you.
Okay, so that makes me ask the next question. Why would we hire our auditing firm, auditors, to do that audit? I know that auditors don't like to be audited by other auditors, but can you clarify that? Question, concern.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in this case, we hire auditors to come in to do the financial audit. This might be this position that I was speaking about earlier today. I'm not sure if we have a position that would be assigned the audit process internally to look at our different controls. That might be the case, or this might be something contracted. But nonetheless, it's someone who's setting up, really, these are risk management protocols, right, that we would have within the organization that we look at, like how many transactions that were had in relation to a policy, was that policy followed to a T? Procurement, when we look at how we procure things, are we meeting everything that's in that policy? That's the kind of stuff it would be looking at.
Is that your thinking too, Betty? Is it like when I look at an audit, you're looking at not just the financial, but you're looking at all parts and pieces and parts of the audit?
When I read this piece in here, my understanding of it was that this would be perhaps part of the regular year-end audit. So perhaps a bit of an extension of the regular year-end audit, because I think they do look at these things. And I know where I worked before, the municipality I was at there, we had just had new auditors come into place who did things a little bit differently than our previous auditors, and they specifically said that every year they did their audit, they would emphasize a different department. So they would always emphasize finance, and then they would kind of rotate. One year they take an extra look at Public Works, another year they take an extra look at Parks and Recreation, and they cycle it through. So when I read this, that was quite consistent with what I was familiar with.
And not to belabor this, but in Nova Scotia, they do have a municipal auditor. that every year we'll take a different jurisdiction and do an audit of the audit. Not suggesting that our auditors are doing a great job. I'm fully confident in MRSB, but it's just, sometimes it's that outside lens. Not asking the government of Prince Edward Island to look at a municipal auditor, but it would be a great asset to all municipalities.
But just on that piece, Betty, your comment strikes me. I kind of like the sound of it. And again, I'm not an auditor and the workings of it, but if the audit piece can lend itself to, like you said, a particular some kind of a rotation that departments on some kind of revolving kind of scale get isolated for, maybe it's public works, it's parks, but there's that sort of a kind of an AG kind of look at at departments. Is that kind of possible to have as part of our policy going forward, or?
So you're saying as part of our policy, would it be to have the auditors go through on a rotating basis? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess basically yes.
I believe so, yes. And that could be part of our engagement letter with the auditors, just clarification as to how they do that piece.
Yeah, I guess just a takeaway and something maybe we can kind of discuss further, not.
And I know as part of their regular work, they review minutes, they look at new policies, they look at new agreements, like they're involved in all of that piece. Now, at a high level, mind you, but they are looking for things like, are we following our policies? They
Yep.
may not be looking at it in as much detail as we might be talking about here, but they're certainly, like, that's part of their work.
Yep. Great, thanks. Okay. I think we slayed the matrix for today, have we? All right, okay. Thank you, CAO Eleanor, on that. Great work. Okay, here we go. Order of business number 9. Motion to move into a closed section as per section 119.1, subsections B and E of the PEI Municipal Government Act. You have a mover? And Councillor, your worship, seconder? Councillor? Okay, Councillor McCabe? All right. Okay. Back to our agenda. Item 10, business rising from closed session, and then there's none, and then number 11, referred from council, requested by Councillor Durang, report attached. You've had, again, I guess the items 8F that Councillor Durang was requesting further clarification on, input. I think we'll, as I think kind of agreed, we'll go through each one, and maybe CAO Eleanor, get you to take us lead through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is in relation to the March 13th, 2023 council meeting, where Councillor Duran requested that a number of motions be considered by council. And following this request at the meeting, Councillor Duran was informed that the process to do this that it would have to be sent to the Finance Committee for consideration. And this process was also confirmed by the city's solicitor following that meeting. So for the committee's consideration, administration is offering the following background and recommendations for these motions as they've been posed. So the first motion requested was a motion to release an unredacted copy of the BDO report. So under the Prince Edward Island Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, the city cannot release a full unredacted report without the permission of impacted individuals and businesses. So what administration has been doing is actively reaching out to impacted individuals and businesses to gain their permission. So we've had some success with some, but not all have provided permission. And we're still working on that, but the city should be able to release a lesser redacted report in the near future. So in this particular motion, administration is recommending that an updated redacted copy of the BDO report be released in accordance with the requirements of the Prince Edward Island Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, and that no further action be taken in relation to the changes to the document. This is the first
11,
motion.
11A,
Second.
second it.
Yep.
Okay.
Question?
No, I'm against, thank you.
Go ahead. 2-1.
Okay, continuing on. The second motion was to have a public meeting to discuss the BDO report. So if a public meeting were to be held to address the report, it is recommended that the purpose of the meeting be very clear. So in thinking about what the purpose of the meeting should be, the following questions are recommended to be considered in thinking about whether the city should host a public meeting on the BDO report. The first question being, why is the city inviting the public to the meeting? What is the city attempting to resolve or accomplish with the public meeting? And can the city offer any additional information other than what has already been provided regarding the report? And if public opinion is sought, how will or can it productively be used by the city in relation to the BDO report recommendation? In considering the above questions, it's clear how this meeting, it's not clear how this meeting would serve the public or what it would resolve or accomplish. There's no additional public information to share that has not already been shared in a public forum. A BDO recommendations and implementation matrix, which was attached and also discussed earlier in today's meeting, has been developed by administration to show how the recommendations will be implemented along with identified timelines. As said earlier, this matrix will be publicly presented to council in a regular council meeting. It will also be brought back to council quarterly with updates on progress. The public will be able to view changes and updates to bylaws and policies in response to the BDO report as they are brought forward to the appropriate council committees and council for decision. Administration is recommending with this one that an additional public meeting not be held and that the BDO recommendations and implementation matrix be shared publicly in an upcoming council meeting for council to review and provide feedback. Further, that the BDO recommendations and implementation matrix be reviewed quarterly at a public council meeting to review progress.
Should motion for that? Moved by Councillor McCabe and seconded by Your Worship.
No, I disagree. I appreciate staff and the CAO and the former CAO, what they've been working on this, and this is great to see, and I thank you for that. But no, I'm not going to vote. Thank you. To go ahead.
Just speaking to the resolution, Mr. Chair, I think what was covered by your former CAO, Donna Waddell, and yourself, Eleanor, that, again, that camera that is up on the west wall there is a live stream to the world on what we do here. This report has been out to the public, and as you said, that as any of the persons named in the report are asked for their permission to allow their names to go public, again, going back and protecting the privacy, I believe it's Protection of Privacy Act. I think that's a good step forward. And again, it's not an investigation of a whistleblower complaint, it's an investigation of a former employee of the City of Charlottetown's issue. So I think we've covered it and we'll continue to cover it, not only through this chamber, but when we get calls from our constituents regarding the report. But the report is up on our website, is it not?
I believe so.
It is. Okay, thank you. Question?
Okay, so that motion has been approved. We'll go next.
Thank you, Chair. So earlier in this meeting, this was corrected. So how it reads right now is a vote to record the issues raised by the last deputy CAO. This was corrected earlier to say a motion to investigate the issues raised by the last deputy CAO. So just to clarify for the record, I am a new CAO. I do not have any connections to any former employees. The first time I met any councillors at this municipality was for my interview. So I come to this from a completely neutral stance. So I reviewed the issues that were raised by the last Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. The issues identify target individuals and do not reveal corruption or theft within the city. Instead, the issues are focused on governance, role clarity. There's a clear difference in leadership styles and communications. The individuals named involved are no longer with the city. And due to the Prince Edward Island Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, information on the individuals involved cannot be released. With my new mandate here at the city, changes are being made to modernize our governance structure, including role clarity and improved communications. Current administration is recommending that the issues raised by the last Deputy Chief Administrative Officer are considered as addressed and closed. Thank you.
Motion? Moved. Your seconder?
I will second that we move this to council with allowing them to look at it to determine whether or not it's closed or not for the final decision on that. I don't think we should determine at this committee if this matters to be deemed closed, but I would like to maybe amend that to say that we will move this to council for that final decision.
Okay.
And is that clear what the seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it up to council for discussion. That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay.
How do you vote, Mr. Mayor?
To move the 11 recommendations up to council?
This particular one is in relation to investigating the deputy, the
CAO.
complaints of the former deputy chief administrative. Nope.
No.
These
No.
are just,
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
going on here. It's a misunderstanding.
And we're in number 5, right?
This is, yeah, D, and in this case, number 5. So for clarity, the issues raised by the former deputy CAO were issues that were sent to council of the day and different individuals in this organization. This isn't the 11 complaints. This isn't anything further than that. This is, I believe it's your most recent Deputy Chief Administrative Officer.
Number 5.
The last DCAO.
Number 5.
I don't even remember seeing, or like I don't have any recollection of what those were, but you're saying that they've been looked at? I'm sorry.
Nope.
Turn your mics on. John, your mic's on.
Oh my goodness. Sorry. Just want to know where I'm going.
This is item D, which in the recommendations on the front of your report is number 5. The list of concerns from the most recent former Deputy Chief Administrative Officer were in the form of an email that was sent.
Has anyone looked at any of those?
So,
Is that was what the report you just
yes.
spieled off on?
So what I'm saying is I have reviewed it. It has, it doesn't resemble the other complaints that we've investigated. They're of a personal nature and have to do with different leadership styles, governance issues in terms of leadership styles and communication, in my opinion.
Thank you, and sorry for the misunderstanding. I'm okay with that staying closed. But again, these are, council can.
Thank you to the chair for clarity then, that what was just approved was that the issues raised by the last deputy, the recommendation to council is that the issues raised by the last Deputy Chief Administrative Officer are considered addressed and closed. That would be your recommendation to them. Okay, thank you.
So it's 2 to 1, right?
So that's recorded with a mover and a seconder? Okay.
Thank you. So the next item is E, and also number 6 on that front page of recommendations. This motion is for a vote to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of legal services to provide information when it's time to go to tender. It was not clear to administration what is specifically being requested in this motion. However, identified in the BDO recommendations and implementation matrix in several sections, in the recommendations and actions, administration will be updating the procurement bylaw and associated policies. Legal services and their role in procurement will be considered in these changes. Administration recommends that the city's legal services in relation to procurement process be considered in updating the procurement bylaw and associated policies.
Is the committee good with that? Mover or seconder?
Can I get some background on that? I didn't hear it. Could you just, what is your recommendation? Like, I see that you do have something there, but.
Sure. So what I could gather from this motion in this request is it's talking about the cost-benefit analysis of legal services to provide information when it's time to go to tender. So I was trying to read into this to see what they're like, what the actual motion is looking for, and what I could gather is it's part of the procurement process. So what I'm suggesting is that city legal services be considered in the creation of our review and creation of our new procurement bylaw and the processes that go along with that. So part of that is that cost-benefit analysis of when we involve legal or if legal should be involved and what that looks like.
Could I ask, Mr. Chair, if that's what the proponent is suggesting Councillor Duran. Like it, when I saw it, is it that every procurement process be given a city's legal services analysis? Can you clarify, Councillor Duran?
No, that's not what I was asking for. A legal, to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of legal services. So I wanted to see, is the city getting the best bang for the buck in legal services? What could we improve on? You know, should we hire a lawyer? Should the costs be looked at or capped at certain questions? Every time we're in a meeting, let's get a legal opinion, everything costs. So let's get a cost-benefit analysis of all our legal department that we're using for the city of Charlottetown. That's what I was looking for. So, the recommendation, I see it goes through procurement. That might be a way of looking at, the process. So I can appreciate what you're trying to do, but, it's not quite what I asked, but that's a good attempt. Thank you.
So again, Eleanor, to clarify, you're looking at using the procurement policy to look at that cost analysis of legal services. I'm trying to get it clarified. I know the council that has proposed these six points. I have his point right here on my phone. So if we do a cost analysis, how do you do that? Like, do you hire a full-time lawyer and see how that works out and then do a comparative analysis? That's where, it's...
Well, the last council, we looked at hiring a lawyer, and that didn't work out with the last CAO. Maybe we could look at a lawyer or, a specific legal background in certain areas and then go to our expert, firm on others. Like it's a cost analysis type of thing with legal services. Where can we save money? Some of the lawyers that we use are extremely intelligent and very costly. So I was just looking at, how could we improve that service?
Councillor Brown, who would you see? You said, let's go ahead and do that. Like, what would your advice be? Who would you go to? How would you? Any ideas how you'd approach that?
CAO has her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest that as part of every annual budget process that we go through a process and we evaluate whether we should have full-time employees, contract employees, or contracted services. That's something we go through in the budget process every year. So given the new information that's just provided here, what I would recommend as a potential solution and a recommendation to council is that as part of the next budget process, evaluate whether legal services should be in-house. This is something that we would do anyway as part of our budget process in terms of fiscal responsibility, but we can certainly get a motion to say that we do that.
I'm fine with that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
So we have a motion then. Where are we on 11E?
I'll motion it.
Okay. By Councillor Drown, seconder. Councillor McCabe, thank you.
So could you clarify the motion?
We're going to look at it budget.
Yeah, no, just clarify the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is part of the next budget process. Administration evaluate whether legal services should be in-house.
Yeah. So speaking to the motion, I know that this has been discussed many times before. One lawyer can't do real estate law. One lawyer can't do criminal law, litigation. That's like an engineer. An engineer is a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer. So Yes, we have engineers here in City Hall, but many times we have to go out for that expertise. So that's the argument I've always been going on or supporting, so I'll be voting against the resolution.
To look at it at all?
We've looked at it many times in the past.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's where we want to just have a look at it. Maybe we could have a general lawyer that could give us some advice. You know, with our last DCAO, she gave us some advice on many topics. So I'm not saying, you know, we could get into real estate, or we could get into, you know, procurement policies or negotiations. We'd need a lawyer that's an expert, but maybe an in-house lawyer might be able to cut down the cost and a lot of this stuff. So that's what my intention was. So I'll
Okay.
motion it or second it, whatever.
All right, okay, moving on.
Okay. Okay. The next motion is to attain all the documents related to one of the paving issues noted in the BDO report. Administration supports the BDO report and is satisfied with the extensive review undertaken. Recommendations and associated actions in relation to recommendation G15-3 are included in the BDO recommendations and implementation matrix, which has to do with the paving. Administration recommends that no further action be taken in investigating the paving issues noted in the BDO report, as the impacted bylaws and policies will be updated as identified in the matrix.
Councillor Drow?
Well, I can appreciate we're tightening things up, but I feel, you know, this is what caused me a lot of issues back in the day when I was trying to get information. If I would have been able to get the information in a timely manner, maybe things wouldn't have gone down this road. So, you know, with all due respect, I can't support this motion. I'd rather see it move ahead. Thank you.
And
I feel like we tried to, as Chair of Public Works, tried to get the right information, right answer for the concern. I feel that, again, we have learned from the thousands of dollars we spent in the BDO report. And I think with our tighter policies, we're just going to do better. So I don't feel the need to move this on anymore.
you're okay? So moved by Councillor McCabe, second?
Yeah, second, and
Your
again,
worship?
Eleanor, Mr. Chair, just referring to your backgrounder, to date, the City of Charlottetown has expended, on the last page, $290,000 for BDO, correct? Approximately 80,000 legal fees, and countless staff hours to address individual complaints and concerns in relation to governance, bylaws, policies, and procedures from 2012 to February 2023. So I think that's the background to your recommendation.
Thank
Go.
you, and through the chair, that's actually connected to the next recommendation, but it also feeds that previous recommendation too, as well, yeah.
So can I address what the mayor had, I don't know where he got that. We were moving a motion, weren't we? So, you know, about the amount of money. Like, at the end of the day, I know to investigate issues costs money. And when the investigator was here, you know, I did say, you know, could you do a little more work? And he certainly said, yes, you know, we have a lot of the bricks and mortar in place now, and it wouldn't be as costly. But for my ask, it would be to get everything cleared, boxed up, and move on. Not, well, look, we paid so much money for this or that, and then move on, but leave a lot of allegations. So, you know, if you want to bring things up, I think we're on the right track. The CAO, or new CAO, has some great ideas here, but, you know, I'd like to see everything clean slate and move on. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, I was just speaking to the resolution, and it overlapped to the next resolution that she's going to be bringing forward. But again, we keep going back to core services, paving roads, building new sidewalks, we take money out and put it somewhere else. It takes it from doing those projects that we want to do for our constituencies, or constituents, and that's why I keep bringing up the numbers, because at some point, and I heard earlier that we were going to be moving on, well, part of that reconciliation or moving on is to look at what we've done so far with BDO. This was asked by members of the former council to do it. We did it, and now we want to do more again. I think we've covered a lot of areas, and the recommendations are there, and we have a new CAO that's looking with using new lenses and a broader view to take us forward. Thank you.
Okay, and
One last comment, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but when, the mayor says the cost is coming out of pavement and sidewalks, well, it was never brought to council where the costs would come. Maybe we could take it out of council's per diems or council's travel allowance or the mayor's budget. I mean, why does someone sit here and say, we're gonna take a lady's sidewalk out that she's been waiting for 5 years? So don't spread things like that. I'd appreciate sticking to the agenda. Again, I apologize, we're getting off track, but thank you very
all right,
much.
and CAO Eleanor, did close the loop on 8, right?
Well, thank you, Chair. I'll just go into that final one, which does talk about, for full transparency and accountability. The city of Charlottetown has expended $290,159 on the BDO report and approximately $80,000 in legal fees to address individual complaints and concerns in relation to governance, bylaws, and policies from 2012 to February 2023. And I say 2012 because that BDO review reaches back to 2012 on some of these topics. The result of the BDO report have been fully detailed where the city needs to improve, and we've created the implementation matrix, which sets a clear path forward for council and the corporation. As the city moves forward, the corporation will adopt a continuous improvement management approach to ensure that bylaws, policies, and procedures are updated to manage risk, to provide accountability and transparency, along with the delivery of customer service excellence. Administration is recommending that further matters raised regarding governance, bylaws, policies, and procedures that fall under the themes of recommendations in the BDO report from January 1st, 2012 to February 1st, 2020, January 1st, 2012 to February 1st, 2023, not be investigated.
And motion for that?
What's your call there?
I think this is where I suggested that I'm comfortable with not investigating myself, but I would like to move this to council for them to have the final say, rather than not be determined by our committee. I think this is a full council decision.
Council, yes. Again, I just want to speak to the cost. I know, I can't.
Your mic's not on.
Well, my mic is off because too many mics are on. Thank you, Chair. Again, we can look at taking money from different budgets to take care of these issues, but again, I keep repeating, we've investigated this thoroughly. We did the same with the former CAO. We brought in two lawyers. We brought in two lawyers because some members of council wanted a independent, a third party to come in and look at the situation, and they did come in and they gave a report, cut and release cut and release and move on. So that vote, when it was taken, was 8-3 to move on. We bring in a forensic audit, and that again was asked by some members of council. And again, the report comes in, and again, the vote goes down, I think 9-2 or 8-2. So, how far you keep going down this rabbit hole means we spend money. So if we take it from this budget or that budget, I can just tell you that the numbers here, 290, 80,000, and then countless staff hours which I would say is up in the 100,000, is a lot of money that we spent on this BDO. And I think that we've got some great recommendations coming out from it, and we have a new CAO with a new finance manager that are really willing to, that are ready to take us forward.
Can
All right.
I speak to that?
Go ahead.
Councillor
Go
McAvoy?
ahead.
Thank you. And I appreciate the cost to the taxpayers, but at the end of the day, what would have been the cost if we didn't do the forensic audit? If we just allowed the way of city business moving forward, you know, or, you know, we have a new CAO here. You know, she's got some great ideas. It's looking good. But when you say a cost, what would be to the taxpayer if we didn't close all these holes or rabbit holes that you're saying? You know, the 18 recommendations, procurement, you know, numerous monetary issues. I'd say it'd be well over the 300,000 that we paid for this. And this is moving forward, right? We're going to move forward. We're going to do a better job.
Councillor Drawing, to your credit, that you know that's it's great. The BDO report has you know has given it that information, and I just like to say, in hopefully come closing this meeting, bringing the meeting to a close, adjournment. Knew it was going to expect it to be a longer meeting today, and it has been for good reason. But on the BDO report, I'd just like to make the comment in terms of the 18 recommendations, in terms of, you know, language open, closed, redacted, and blackness. But the BDO report, there was 18 points, and it goes, you know, complaint, and then 1, 2 is BDO's finding, and all the point 3s from 1 to 18, which is BDO's recommendations. There's no redactions there. It's all about policy, how to fix the solutions, and that's where, you know, as chair of finance, that's where I kind of want to hope that we can move as a council and a group going forward, and you know, and hopefully we can fix the problems. I think, you know, and I think 6-8 months from now, we're going to be a long ways to having the protocols and bylaws and policies in place to that. So that's the end of my speech. We ready to go to adjournment?
Are we going to vote on the resolution?
Oh,
the
sorry.
recommendation? Yeah. She moved, I seconded. We have to take a vote. I'm for it. Yeah.
So we're moving the last issued, council, or all of them?
The 8?
No, the 11 allegations.
Okay, yeah, we'll move that to council. That'd be great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good, good,
Number 8, the recommendation is going.
yes.
Yep. Adjournment?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second?
Right on. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you.